please welcome our chairman, Mr. Adam Walker.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. It's always a pleasure to be down here. It's great to see some old faces in here, mine, Sharon and various others who are knocking about. But it's an interesting time in which we're living, isn't it? Because we've been out on the streets today. We've been down in Bury, and we've been campaigning with this leaflet, the Vote Leave leaflet, and just getting general opinion of what the things are that are affecting people and the various things that are bothering them. And the question was, basically, I was walking around the streets with a microphone. I was saying, are you in or are you out? And they're thinking, well, what's he talking about? The okie-cokie? Or what? So I had to refine my question slightly. And say, well, it's to do with the EU referendum. Are you going to vote in or are you going to vote out? And that helped things a little bit, because we weren't talking about a dance that people do at kids' parties. So the reaction we got was very, very interesting and quite fascinating, because the vast majority of people who we spoke to said they were voting out. They were voting out. And I thought, well, we've heard that the in campaign is doing quite well and that the out campaign is slightly ahead of the in campaign in the polls. But from what I got today, it was very, very different. It was about 95% out with about 5% in. Now, interestingly enough, the next question I asked people, after asking them are they going to vote in or are they going to vote out, was why? Because I'm intrigued to know why people vote in a certain way. And in almost every single answer that I got, it was because of immigration. And that was fascinating, because of immigration. And this is playing on people's minds. People are worried. They are seriously worried about this problem of immigration. And when you ask them to elaborate a little bit on it, then it comes on to the jobs, the way that their wages have gone down, the way they can't support their families because of the influx of migrants. And people are seriously worried about what's going to happen in the future. Seriously worried. And that's why most of them were voting out. So we had a good day today in Bury. Fascinating time. Good speaking to normal people. The younger people were a bit more difficult to crack, because they've been brought up in an education system which is indoctrinating them into believing that they're safe in the bosom of the EU. Some of them are totally and utterly brainwashed, talking about how we now live in a multicultural society and that it's great and there should be more of it, to which I asked, well, when will there be enough multiculturalism? Will it be when we don't exist as a people, or will it be when there's none of us left? And they couldn't really answer that question. And I asked them about the industry as well. I said, well, what about your jobs? Well, you can get a job if you really want one. I said, yeah, but there's no real industry left, is there? The industry's shot. We've got no shipyards, we've got no steel, we've got no coal. I said, so basically what you're saying there is about the jobs. You've got a job in a shop and you spend your wage in the shop. So it's just a shopping system. It's a global capitalist system that doesn't actually produce anything. So, you know, they are a bit disillusioned, the younger ones. I think it's maybe because they have a few ethnic minority people in their classrooms and they're being told that racism is bad. That's probably why they have that attitude. But, you know, when they start to enter the workforce, when they have to pay their own taxes, when they become ill, when they have to have children, when their condition is so bad that they can't get a place in a hospital, or when their children are being targeted by Muslim grooming gangs, then they might change their minds slightly from what they have today. But unfortunately, they will get a vote as well, which is quite sad, because I don't think half of them know exactly what they're voting for. £55 million a day. £55 million. They reckon it takes about £100 million to build a hospital. A state-of-the-art, up-to-date, modern-day hospital. £100 million. So in 2 days, that's today and tomorrow, we could have a beautiful, nice, brand-new, state-of-the-art hospital to look after our people, our elderly, and those people who need it, not the rest of the world. So how do you save money? They're always talking about the austerity measures. There's £55 million a day we could save. And that's just a small little blip in the ocean compared to some of the other money that the country is wasting. Turkey. Now, we've seen clips of Mr Cameron saying he wants to pave a way from Ankara to here. I wouldn't want to pave a way from Ankara to here at all. I think there are enough Turkish Muslims in Europe as it is, and I would suggest that we don't need any more Turkish Muslims. We don't need any more Muslims, for that fact. I don't have a problem with Muslims as long as they're in a Muslim country, and as long as they're not affecting us in a derogatory way, and as long as they're not raping our children, and as long as they're trying to integrate into our society. But as we've seen, this is not possible. Their holy book will not allow them to do that. So unfortunately, I don't have much time for that religion at this point in time. So there, we say no to the EU because we don't want Turkey to be allowed to come into the EU, because as soon as they're granted EU citizenship, they're going to be on the ferry or through the tunnel, and they're going to be here in amongst our communities, and they're going to cause a lot of trouble. Now, I dare say that because I know, because I've seen it. You've seen what happened in America over the weekend. You've seen one of the police commissioners in France, him and his wife murdered, left a 3-year-old child without parents by an Islamic extremist. Now, it's got to stop. And they'll say, oh, you're pointing the finger at Muslims. Yes, we can point the finger at Muslims. That's not a problem. We can do that because it predominantly is Muslims that are doing these abhorrent acts. But what I would also like to point my finger at is people like David Cameron and the hypocrites who we have in Westminster, who tell us how we should be living our lives whilst living glorious lives locked behind closed gates themselves with guards and people who are protecting them. We aren't afforded that. We just have to live amongst normal people in a normal society where we need to protect our own backs. So those are the people I blame more than the Muslims, the politicians, for allowing it to happen. So let's look at our NHS. I said there £55 million a day being wasted and thrown away into the EU bottomless pit. And we've got an NHS there, and we've got the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, TTIP, which is coming our way. And it is a bunch of people who are extremely rich who will be deciding to break our NHS and make money from what they can find within the NHS. And they're going to make sure that there's nothing much left of the NHS for us to enjoy, and basically privatise it. So they're looking to privatise our NHS, which is not why the NHS was built. The NHS was built a long time ago to look after people who were ill, people who paid into a system and who deserved to be looked after, and we've lost that. Now it's a bunch of managers who are being paid an extortionate amount of money, and if you're lucky you can get in to see a doctor. If you're even luckier, you might get an operation 2 years down the line, and a lot of it is to do with the way that the system is being run, and it's being run for profit. And if you think you've seen a lot of profit making recently, wait until the TTIP kicks in. And we've made those deals with Obama, and then hey presto, they shred the NHS and leave nothing for us. And before we know it, we'll not get any health care at all until we have insurance. So there we go. Interestingly enough, our NHS isn't a national health service. It's become an international health service, as many of us already know. And people are coming from different countries and they're using it and they're abusing it. I don't think that's correct. I think if you haven't paid into a system or you haven't got insurance because you're from another country, then you shouldn't be able to use our national health service. It's only right, and it works in other countries and it should work in ours. Thank you. So we should be putting British people first. Why shouldn't we put our own people first? For God's sake, it makes common sense. Every country around the world should put their people first. So they talk about we need to look after these people and that people, and what about these Syrian refugees? That's fine. Yes, those people need to be looked after, but they also need to be looked after by people in their country. And we can't look after the rest of the world from a position of weakness. We can only look after the world from a position of strength. And it's the same if we strip that right back. We'll strip that right back and I say, right, okay, Paul, the Northwest RO, he needs a piggyback up the street. Okay? Don't know why he needs a piggyback, but he needs a piggyback up the street. And he says, Adam, give us a piggyback up the street. And I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, Paul, I can't. Why not? I've got 2 broken legs. Position of weakness. I can't give him a piggyback up the street. Right? If my legs are okay and they're fine, he can say, Adam, give me a piggyback up the street. I say, right, hop on. Where we go? Up we get. I can help him up the street. And likewise with us, if we make our country weak by filling it with immigrants, wrecking our NHS and destroying our infrastructure, we're making our country weaker. And we can't help other people from that position. We will just become weaker ourselves and we will end up being part of the huge problem. So in order to help others, we must be strong ourselves. And in order to be strong ourselves, we need to put British people first. So we have the scaremongering by the Remain campaign. They're pulling everything out. They're talking about pensions now. Some ladies were talking about it on the street saying, they're not going to scare us. We know they're talking a load of rubbish. They don't believe a word Cameron says anymore. Honestly, he is the boy that cried wolf. He is the consummate boy that cried wolf. Nobody believes a single word he said. He was stood on that debate there, and I could have laughed at his stance. He stood there like this. Nice, big, strong stance. And people look at him thinking, what a pleb. Because everything that came out of his mouth and everything that's come out of his mouth and will come out of his mouth is utter rubbish. And people don't believe it. So they're scaremongering. They're saying there's going to be insecurities with regards to the populations and that the Western population is going to be destroyed if we leave the EU. I would argue that Western population, and particularly ours in this country, is going to be destroyed if we don't get out of the EU, because we've been inundated with migrants and immigrants, or whatever you want to call them, from other countries who are refusing to live by our ways. So by getting out of the EU, it's going to make us stronger in that respect. So the scaremongering by the Remain campaign, it's utter nonsense, utter and total nonsense. Don't believe a single word that they're saying. And they'll quote lots of figures and facts and they'll try and bamboozle people. And I believe they're trying to bamboozle people is because they just want people to be totally and utterly switched off. And people are just going to think, oh, I'm sick of that. I've had enough. I can't be bothered. £650 million there, £350 billion there, £65 trillion there. Yeah, 650,000 there, 550 there. Ah! Information overload. Can't handle it. Can't compute, no vote, no vote. And that's what they're after. So our message is very simple. Forget about what they're saying about facts and figures. You've got to go with your heart. You've got to stay with your heart and think about your future. Think about the future of your children. Think about the sacrifices we've made in the past. Look at what we've done. We ruled over about a third of the world. We had an industrial revolution with some of the greatest minds the world has ever known in Northern Europe, right? We've been through 2 world wars. All of those things without being in the EU. Without being in the EU and without mass immigration. We've done all those things. We can do them again. There's no reason why we can't. We are the British. We're strong people. We've got it in our hearts. And I would ask you to vote with your heart. Get yourself to the polling station and remember the sacrifices that others have made so that we can be free here today and so that we can walk around the streets and put that cross in that box to leave that horrible fascist dictatorship. So I'll leave you with this one thing. As I've just said, we are the British. We are proud of who we are. Britain has been great in the past and there is no reason whatsoever why we cannot be great in the future. Thank you.
To donate to the British National Party, please call 0844 809 4581 or go to www.bnp.org.uk/donations/general.